On today's podcast, we are discussing a brand new book by David D. Reynolds called Proving 32 AD. And now, our hosts.
You know, have you ever had that moment where a historical fact you thought was absolutely solid just turns out to be maybe a little bit off?
Happens more often than you'd think.
Right. Well, today we're diving deep into one of those. It's a real historical puzzle, something that scholars have, wrestled with for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today is to try and pin down the true date of the crucifixion of Christ. It's been this major historical and obviously religious conundrum for ages.
And we think we might finally have a way to unwind it, thanks to this stack of sources you send over.
Mm-hmm.
Especially those pieces from Proving 32 AD, really insightful stuff.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that the sources suggest it's not necessarily about super complex math or, deciphering some lost code.
No, not really.
It seems the problem might be more of a logical misstep, something fundamental about how we've looked at calendars from that time, like some kind of funny math creeping in.
Exactly. Funny math is a good way to put it. The root of this whole thing actually goes way back to the Julian calendar, Julius Caesar, 45 BCE. The issue was it slightly overestimated the length of the solar year. Just a tiny fraction of a day too long each year.
Doesn't sound as much.
No, but over centuries it adds up. That tiny error meant astronomical events, like the spring equinox, started drifting backward in the calendar year. We're talking about a full day every 100 years or so.
Wow, okay. So that drift would eventually cause problems, right? Especially for things tied to the seasons like Easter.
Precisely. By the time Pope Gregory III tackled this in 1582, the spring equinox wasn't happening around March 21st anymore, like it was supposed to be, back near the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. It had shifted all the way back to March 11th.
March 11th. Okay, that's a significant shift. So Pope Gregory decided a fix was needed.
Yep, a major calendar overhaul. And his solution was pretty bold. To get the calendar back in sync, he just chopped 10 days right out of it.
Just removed them.
Gone. People literally went to sleep on Thursday, October 4th, 1582, and woke up the next morning, and boom, it's Friday, October 15th.
Imagine having a birthday in that gap. Erased from history.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. Or planning anything for those 10 days. Just vanished.
Okay, so skipping 10 days corrects the date drift. Seems straightforward enough, but our sources hint there's a massive, often missed consequence here. What was that hidden shift?
This is the absolute crux of it. This is where it gets really, really interesting. Chopping those 10 days didn't just change the number date, it also messed with the day of the week.
How so?
Well, think about it. 10 days is one full week, plus 3 extra days. So when they jumped from the 4th to the 15th, the day of the week didn't just pick up where it left off. A day that would have been, say, Monday, October 4th in the old Julian system effectively became Thursday, October 4th in the new Gregorian system if you were projecting it back.
Wait, say that again, a 3-day shift in the weekday?
A 3-day shift. And here's the kicker, the thing that seems to have tripped everyone up. We looked at tons of modern calendar converters and historical tools. They adjust the date number correctly when you go back before 1582, but we couldn't find a single one that automatically accounts for this weekday shift.
Seriously. So, for centuries, people calculating historical dates might have been consistently off by 3 days of the week.
It looks that way. It's like a fundamental calculation error hiding in plain sight.
And you're saying there's actual proof of this, not just, theoretical math.
Oh yeah, tangible proof. This was the real aha moment for me, seeing it black and white. We pulled up images of old newspaper mastheads from the time when countries were switching over.
Like what?
Okay, get this. You see a paper printed under the Julian calendar dated, say, Monday, April 17th, 1704. But when you convert that exact date to the Gregorian system, which was already in use elsewhere, that same day, April 17th, 1704, was actually a Thursday.
Monday becomes Thursday, wow.
Exactly, and there are more. We found another. Julian, Saturday, July 16, 1720, converts to Gregorian, Tuesday, July 16.
Saturday to Tuesday. That's 3 days forward.
Right, and another from the Post-Boy newspaper, 1716. Julian, Tuesday, November 27 becomes Gregorian, Friday, November 27, Tuesday to Friday. It's consistently a 3-day jump forward in the week when you switch to Gregorian.
These old newspapers basically seal the deal then. The 3-day weekday shift is undeniable.
It seems indisputable based on this evidence, and the implications are huge. So for you listening, this isn't just some dusty historical footnote.
No, it changes everything.
Right. It fundamentally impacts how we understand any historical date, before 1582, especially critical biblical events. If the day of the week is wrong in our calculations, the entire sequence of events gets skewed.
That makes perfect sense. And to really grasp why the specific shift matters so much for the crucifixion date, we probably need to understand just how messy calendars were back in the ancient world anyway. It wasn't like everyone was on Google Calendar, right?
Not even close. Our sources paint a picture of, well, calendrical chaos. You had the Persian system, the Babylonian, the Roman, the Jewish, all operating differently, sometimes side by side.
Must have been incredibly confusing for regular people.
Oh, absolutely. Think about practical things.
Yeah.
A farmer needed to know the right time to plant based on seasons. Get the calendar wrong, you miss the rains, your crop fails, your family starves. Or a merchant trying to hit market day in the next town, but their calendar is different.
Yeah.
Or tax deadlines. It caused real, everyday problems.
And the sources mention a specific clash between Roman and Jewish calendars.
Yeah, that was a big one. The Romans used a solar calendar, but they also had this thing called a nundial cycle, basically an 8-day market cycle, which is 9 days counted inclusively. It didn't line up neatly with the weeks.
Okay.
But the Jewish calendar was lunisolar, based on both moon and sun. And crucially, it had the 7-day week with the Sabbath rest on the 7th day. You can imagine the Romans not understanding, or maybe not caring, scheduling important events or market days right on the Jewish Sabbath. Constant friction.
Right. And the Jewish calendar itself wasn't static either, was it? It evolved.
Definitely. Its roots are in the Babylonian lunisolar calendar. They share some month names like Nisan, Tishri. Both originally had 12 months, started the month by actually seeing the new crescent moon, and added leap months periodically to keep the lunar cycles aligned with the solar year and seasons.
But then came the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. That must have changed things dramatically.
Hugely. Before 70 CE, the Sanhedrin, the Jewish High Council in Jerusalem, was responsible for formally declaring the new moon based on witness sightings and deciding when to add leap months. This kept the whole system observation-based.
But with the temple destroyed and the council scattered...
They couldn't rely on observation from Jerusalem anymore. So the system had to shift to being pre-calculated. This eventually led to the modern fixed Hebrew calendar, which scholars now think was finalized maybe closer to the 10th century AD, not necessarily by Hillel II in 359 AD, as previously thought.
And there's a really important detail in our sources about how that modern calendar works versus the one in Jesus' time, right? Something about postponement rules.
Yes, crucial point. The modern Hebrew calendar has rules to prevent certain holidays, like Rosh Hashanah, from falling on specific days of the week, mainly to avoid issues with the Sabbath. So dates sometimes get shifted a day or two. But, and this is key, those postponement rules did not exist in the first century, in Jesus' time. Back then, if Passover or another feast day fell on a certain day, according to the moon and sun, that's the day they observed it. No shifting.
That's a critical distinction for lining up Passion Week.
Absolutely. And there's one more calendar ancient Jews used that we need to mention.
Oh, another one.
Yeah, but this one was different. It was a 360-day calendar, sometimes called a prophetic year or an administrative year. It wasn't really for religious festivals, more for, like, planning and administration.
Makes sense. 360 is an easier number to work with than 365 and a quarter.
Exactly. Divides nicely, great for calculating taxes, project timelines, rations, that kind of thing. Archaeologists have even found these small bone plaques from ancient Judah that seem to be portable versions of these administrative calendars.
So figures like Daniel or Joseph working in big administrations in Babylon or Egypt, they might have used this.
It's very plausible. And this 360-day administrative calendar isn't just some historical curiosity. Our sources argue it's potentially the key used in biblical prophecies, specifically in Daniel's famous 70 weeks prophecy.
Okay, let's unpack that. Daniel's 70 weeks, found in Daniel chapter 9. It's presented as this God-given timeline specifically about Israel and Jerusalem, right?
That's the context, yes. A divine schedule, so to speak.
And the core idea is that these weeks aren't 7-day weeks, but weeks of years.
Correct. Each week represents 7 years. So 70 weeks means 70 times 7 years, which totals 490 years.
And the prophecy breaks that 490 years down.
It does, into 3 parts. First, there are 7 weeks, which is 49 years. Then there's a period of 62 weeks, that's 434 years. And finally, there's the last single week, the 70th week, which is 7 years.
Okay, so the first 2 chunks, the 7 weeks and the 62 weeks, that adds up to 69 weeks, or 483 years.
Right, 483 years total for those first 2 segments.
And what are the start and end points for this 483-year period? Is there agreement on that?
There's pretty broad agreement on the starting point. Daniel says it begins with a word or decree to restore and build Jerusalem. Most scholars connect this to the decree King Artaxerxes gave to Nehemiah, which we read about in Nehemiah chapter 2. That happened around 445 BC.
Okay, 445 BC is the start, and the end of the 69 weeks, the 483 years.
The prophecy says, after the 62 weeks, following the initial 7, the Anointed One, the Messiah, shall be cut off. This is almost universally understood by Christians to refer to the death of Jesus Christ on the cross.
Cut off meaning crucified. Makes sense. But then there's that final week, the 70th week, those last 7 years in Daniel 9:27. That's where the debate comes in.
That's the big debate. Does that final 7-year period follow immediately after the 69th week, perhaps culminating in the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD? Or is there a gap, a pause in the timeline, meaning that 70th week is still future?
And this is where those earlier calendar problems, especially that 3-day weekday shift, really started to mess things up for scholars trying to make the timeline fit, right?
Exactly. Even brilliant minds got tangled up because they were working with flawed calendar assumptions. People like Sir Robert Anderson, Harold Hoehner, Sir Edward Denning, they did incredible detailed work, but they consistently missed the impact of the Gregorian reform on the weekdays before 1582.
Okay, let's look at Sir Robert Anderson. He's famous for his work on this. What was his approach?
Anderson started his count from March 14th, 445 BC. He calculated 483 years using those 360-day prophetic years we mentioned, which comes out to exactly 173,880 days.
Okay, very precise.
Very. And he landed on April 6th, 32 AD. He identified this specific date as Palm Sunday, Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem.
Sounds plausible on the surface. What were the errors?
Well, several big ones, according to the sources we reviewed. First, his start date, March 14th, 445 BC, is likely too early in the year to be the first day of Nisan, the month the decree likely occurred. Nisan 1 begins after the spring equinox. Second, and this is the big one, he mixed Julian and Gregorian calculations without correcting for that 3-day weekday shift. So his conclusion that April 6, 32 AD was a Sunday, it's actually wrong once you apply the correction. It wasn't a Sunday.
So the day of the week was off.
Way off.
Okay.
Third, he pegged the endpoint to Palm Sunday, but Daniel 9 says the Messiah is cut off, which points much more strongly to the crucifixion itself, not the entry into Jerusalem a few days earlier. And finally, apparently, he also miscounted the number of Julian leap years within that period.
Okay, so Anderson's math, while precise, was built on some faulty assumptions. What about Harold Hoehner? Did he manage to fix it?
Hoehner tried. He saw some of Anderson's issues. He adjusted the start date to March 5th, 444 BC, and ended on March 30th, 33 AD. He also identified his end date as Palm Sunday and used the same 173,880-day count.
So did his adjustments work out?
Still problematic.
Yeah.
His 444 BC start date, March 5th, was also too early for Nisan 1 that year. The equinox wasn't until later, making Nisan 1 fall around April 2nd. And critically, he chose 33 AD because he assumed the crucifixion had to be on a Friday that year. But again, applying the 3-day Gregorian correction shows that the crucifixion day, Nisan 14, which was April 3rd in 33 AD, would have actually been a Tuesday.
A Tuesday crucifixion, that doesn't fit the 3 days and nights in the tomb before Sunday resurrection at all.
Not even close. It leaves only one night. Plus, Hoehner apparently had to adjust Artaxerxes' reign year to make his dates fit, which is, forcing the data. And like Anderson, he completely missed the 3-day weekday shift adjustments.
Seems like a recurring theme. What about Sir Edward Denny? Did he take a different tack?
Denny went a different way. He picked an even earlier start date, 458 BC, based on a decree mentioned in Ezra chapter 7. He also rejected the 360-day prophetic year, using solar years instead. He believed all 70 weeks ran consecutively, ending in 33 AD.
Okay.
But then, sort of contradictorily, he also suggested the 70th week might happen again in the future.
What were the problems with this theory?
Well, that 458 BC start date is shaky, because Ezra 7 seems focused on the temple and its service, whereas Daniel 9 explicitly mentions restoring and rebuilding the city of Jerusalem, which fits Nehemiah's decree better. Rejecting the 360-day year also ignores that administrative prophetic calendar evidence.
Right.
And biblically, there's really no precedent or support for the idea of the 70th week happening twice. And guess what?
Let me guess. He also missed the 3-day weekday shift.
You got it.
Yeah.
He didn't apply the correction. If he had, he might have seen that in 32 AD, Nisan 14 fell on a Thursday, which, as we'll see, fits the crucifixion narrative much better than the traditional Friday.
So the bottom line here is that these respected scholars, working diligently, were fundamentally hampered by this uncorrected calendar issue, that 3-day weekday shift.
It seems to be the critical missing piece in all these earlier calculations. It distorted their conclusions about the year and, crucially, the day of the week.
But once you do apply that correction, suddenly things start to click into place, especially for the year 32 AD.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's quite remarkable. When you correctly calculate the dates for 32 AD, factoring in that 3-day shift, you find that Nisan 14, the day the Passover lambs were sacrificed, the day Jesus was crucified, falls squarely on a Thursday.
Thursday, not Friday.
Thursday. And this is huge because it solves the long-standing problem of fitting Jesus' statement that he would be in the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights, just like Jonah.
How so? Explain that.
Okay, if Jesus was crucified and buried late Thursday afternoon, before sunset marked the start of the next day, he was in the tomb for Thursday night.
Right.
Then Friday day and Friday night.
That's 2 nights.
And Saturday day and Saturday night.
That's 3 nights.
3 days and 3 nights. Then he rose early Sunday morning. It fits perfectly. The traditional Good Friday crucifixion only allows for Friday night and Saturday night, 2 nights, not 3.
That makes so much sense. It resolves that tension completely. And how does this Thursday crucifixion align with the Jewish feasts happening that week in 32 AD?
It aligns beautifully like clockwork. So Nisan 14, Thursday, was preparation day. The Passover lambs are being slaughtered in the temple complex. Jesus is crucified, dies, and is quickly buried before sunset hits.
Okay.
Then Thursday's sunset marks the beginning of Nisan 15. This is the start of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and it's a high holy day, a special Sabbath. This is when the Passover Seder meal would actually be eaten. While that's happening, Jesus is in the tomb.
So the Seder happens after he's already buried.
Correct. Then comes Nisan 16, starting Friday sunset. This day was typically the Feast of First Fruits, celebrating the beginning of the barley harvest. A sheaf of barley was waved by the priests. Jesus is still in the tomb.
Still in the tomb. But wait, there's another calendar twist here, isn't there? Something from Leviticus.
Yes, this is another fascinating detail from the sources. Leviticus 23 gives instructions about first fruits. In the specific year 32 AD, Nisan 16, the normal day for first fruits, actually fell on the weekly Sabbath, Saturday.
So a potential conflict.
Right. Because the first fruit ceremony involved work forbidden on the Sabbath, Leviticus provided an allowance. If first fruits fell on the weekly Sabbath, the ceremony was to be delayed until the day after the Sabbath.
Which would be?
Sunday, Nisan 17.
So in 32 AD, the Feast of First Fruits was actually celebrated on Sunday, Nisan 17.
Exactly. And what happened early on Sunday? Nisan 17.
Jesus' resurrection.
Precisely. The Apostle Paul calls the resurrected Christ the first fruits from among the dead. He rose on the very day the delayed Feast of First Fruits was being celebrated. The timing is just perfect.
Wow. That's incredible synchronization. It feels like the calendar itself testifies to the story when read correctly. Okay, so this Thursday timeline works. But what about the Last Supper? If the crucifixion was Thursday and the Seder was Thursday night while he was in the tomb, what was that meal Jesus had with his disciples? Wasn't that the Passover meal?
That's a great question, and the sources offer a compelling alternative. It suggests the Last Supper was likely not the formal Passover Seder meal.
So what was it then?
It was likely a Galilean tradition called the Suda Mafseket, which translates to something like a concluding meal or a meal of cessation.
Suda Mafseket, never heard of it.
It was apparently a meal eaten on the evening before the fast of the firstborn. The fast of the firstborn was a 24-hour fast observed by firstborn Jewish males on Nisan 14, the day the Passover lambs were slain, in remembrance of being spared during the Exodus.
Okay.
So this Suda Mafseket would have been eaten on what we'd call Wednesday evening, which Jewish reckoning would consider the beginning of Nisan 14. It was a final meal to sustain them before the fast began at sunrise on Thursday, Nisan 14.
So Jesus and his disciples, many being Galilean, had this concluding meal Wednesday night.
That's the proposition. And it resolved the apparent contradiction between John's Gospel, which clearly states Jesus was crucified as the Passover lambs were being slaughtered on Nisan 14, meaning before the Seder meal, and the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, which referred to the Last Supper using Passover language.
It allows both to be true. They had a meal with Passover significance, the Suda Mafseket, on Wednesday night, and then Jesus was crucified on Thursday during the lamb slaughtering before the actual Seder meal on Thursday night.
Exactly. And we know the Last Supper wasn't the formal Seder for other reasons, too. Key elements were missing.
Like what?
No lamb was mentioned. The Passover lamb was central to the Seder, eaten on Nisan 15. Also, the 4 ritual cups of wine, which are a key part of the modern Seder, were largely a rabbinic tradition solidified after the temple's destruction in 70 AD. Jesus was in the tomb during the actual Seder of 32 AD.
So at that meal, Jesus wasn't following a standard Seder ritual. He was doing something new.
Precisely. He took the bread and the wine of that Suda Mafseket meal and gave them profound new meaning. His body broken and his blood shed for the new covenant. He was unique to that moment.
Okay, this timeline, the Thursday crucifixion in 32 AD, seems incredibly coherent when you factor in the calendar correction and these Jewish customs. It fits the 3 days and nights, it aligns perfectly with the feasts, and it clarifies the Last Supper.
It really does seem to resolve many long-standing issues.
So that brings us back to Daniel's prophecy. We've accounted for the 69 weeks ending with the crucifixion in 32 AD. What about that final piece of the puzzle, the 70th week, those last 7 years? Where does that fit?
Right. If the 69 weeks ended in 32 AD, what about week 70? The sources we looked at present compelling arguments that there's a gap or parenthesis and the prophetic timeline between the 69th week and the 70th, meaning that final 7-year period is still future.
A gap? Why would there be a gap?
Well, the strongest arguments come from Jesus himself and the New Testament writers. In Matthew 24, Jesus directly references Daniel's prophecy when he talks about the abomination of desolation.
Okay.
And he says this event will usher in a great tribulation, unlike anything the world has ever seen, past or future. He explicitly says will be worse than anything before and anything to come.
Worse than 70 AB, worse than the world wars.
That's what he says, which strongly suggests he's talking about a future period, not something that was fulfilled solely by the Romans destroying Jerusalem, terrible as that was.
What other evidence points to a future 70th week?
The Apostle Paul, in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, talks about a future figure, the man of lawlessness or Antichrist, who will oppose God, exalt himself, and even sit in God's temple, proclaiming himself to be God. This sounds remarkably like the figure described in Daniel 9:2-7, who makes a covenant and then breaks it, causing desolation.
Okay, that parallel is strong.
And then you have the book of Revelation. Revelation 13 describes a global figure, the beast, who is given authority for 42 months.
42 months. That's 3.5 years.
Exactly. Half of the 7-year week mentioned in Daniel. This beast commands worldwide worship and unleashes persecution on a scale far beyond what happened in Judea in 70 AD. It points to a future global fulfillment of that final 7-year period.
So the idea of a gap in prophetic timelines isn't actually that unusual in the Bible.
Not at all. The sources point out several examples. Think about the prophecies of the Messiah's coming. Some describe his suffering and death, others his glorious reign as king on David's throne.
Right, like in Luke 1, Gabriel tells Mary her son Jesus will be given the throne of his father David and reign over the house of Jacob forever.
Exactly. But obviously that didn't happen at his first coming. He suffered and died. There's been a nearly 2,000-year gap, and counting, between his first coming and his second coming, when he will establish that kingdom. It's a massive prophetic parenthesis.
That's a great example. Any others?
Yeah, remember when Jesus reads from the scroll of Isaiah in the synagogue in Nazareth? It's in Luke chapter 4. He reads the part about proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor. But he stops reading mid-sentence. The very next line in Isaiah 61 says, "And the day of vengeance of our God." Jesus stopped before that. He was essentially saying, the year of the Lord's favor is fulfilled now in me, but the day of vengeance, that's still future. Another gap.
So seeing a gap between Daniel's 69th and 70th week fits a larger biblical pattern.
It seems to. The first 69 weeks pointed to Messiah's first coming and his being cut off. The 70th week seems tied to events surrounding his second coming.
Okay, let's try and bring this all together then. This deep dive, prompted by your sources, has really highlighted the absolutely crucial impact of that 3-day weekday shift caused by the Gregorian calendar reform.
It's the key that seems to unlock the timeline.
And understanding that, plus the nuances of ancient calendars like the 360-day administrative year and the actual timing of Jewish feasts in the first century, it all points quite definitively towards a Thursday crucifixion in 32 AD.
A timeline that perfectly accommodates the 3 days and 3 nights in the tomb and aligns stunningly with the delayed feast of first fruits on Resurrection Sunday.
So for you listening, this isn't about splitting historical hairs. The point is, understanding this correctly makes the biblical account of Passion Week, the very cornerstone of Christian faith, even more credible, more historically grounded, more trustworthy.
It shows how careful historical analysis and understanding the context can actually reinforce the biblical narrative. History and faith working together.
And maybe here's a final thought to leave you with. Daniel's prophecy laid out a timeline concerning the Messiah's first coming, the 69 weeks. Despite centuries of calendar confusion and calculation errors, history unfolded exactly as predicted. culminating in 32 AD.
The precision is remarkable once the calendar is corrected.
So, if God ensured the first 69 weeks happen with such precision, doesn't that strengthen our confidence that the final 70th week, that period the Bible indicates is still future, will also unfold exactly according to His plan at His appointed time?
It offers a profound sense of hope, I think. A confidence that God's overarching plan, foretold so long ago, is still reliably moving towards its ultimate fulfillment.
You have been listening to a discussion about the short but powerful book, Proving 32 AD by David D. Reynolds, available now on Amazon.com digitally or in print. Thank you for tuning in.